Welcome to Inside Design with Kandrac Kole. This podcast is a conversation between two business partners, Joanne Kandrac and Kelly Kole. Join us for a lively conversation about all things interior design, from current projects, trade show experiences, worldwide travel, what's in, what's out, and all the challenges and wins they've had running their successful design business. Whether you're a seasoned interior designer, new to the industry, or a creative enthusiast, you will walk away with insightful information, newfound inspiration, and a smile on your face after listening to these two. And here they are, Joanne and Kelly.
Hey everybody, welcome to Inside Design with Kandrac Kole. Today is episode 154, and we have a very wonderful guest, Betsy Riley, who has worked with Atlanta Magazine for 20 years in various capacities, and she became the editor-in-chief in 2017. In 2022, the magazine was recognized as the best city and regional magazine in the country.
Wow.
That's a big deal, by Folio Magazine, and was recently nominated for General Excellence by the American Society of Magazine Editors. Betsy has served on the board of the Atlanta Press Club, was formerly a regular contributor to local NPR affiliate, WABE. And then in 2015, we were very excited that she launched a quarterly shelter magazine, Atlanta Magazine's Home, which remains her favorite project.
And which we're featured in this month, which we're going to get to in just a second. But first, we got to tell you that this episode is sponsored by our friends at ProSource Wholesale in Marietta, Georgia. It's our go-to source. As you know, we talk about them all the time for flooring, carpet, tile, plumbing projects, and a whole lot more. They're so easy to get to, just inside the perimeter, 2 exits from the Atlanta Braves Stadium. So they are, like I said, a great resource for trade professionals and their clients, with a beautiful showroom with over 20,000 samples and an experienced kitchen and bath designers on staff. The team at ProSource is outstanding. We love them all, and they're so helpful and communicative. They're very detailed, and they've helped us so much. We've just had to select tile and flooring and plumbing and hardware for a 10,000 square foot house, and they were with us every step of the way. So their half yearly April sale is coming up, and so ProSource Corporate and the team, they negotiate an additional 5 to 10% off from the manufacturers, and they pass all that savings on. So they're offering a special for Kandrac Kole listeners only. Be sure to stop by the showroom. Tell the team that you heard about ProSource from Kandrac Kole from our podcast, and Stacy, who's the showroom manager, will apply a $50 coupon to your first order of $150 or more. So
It's a great offer.
yeah, thanks guys.
Yeah. Okay, welcome, Betsy. In our 5 years of doing this podcast, I can't believe we've never had an editor as a guest. So this is
awful.
Very exciting. And as Kelly mentioned, it's also timely because one of our most favorite projects was featured in the spring issue. It's out on the newsstands now.
Ta-da!
We'll talk about it in a bit. Your excitement is... she can't help it.
But we've been wanting to be featured in this magazine for so long. Yeah. It's truly a love of ours.
So Betsy, go ahead and give us just a little bit of background, like where you grew up and went to college, how you got to where you are today.
Oh my goodness. Well, I grew up bounced around, but Knoxville, Tennessee, mostly.
Okay.
Went to Wake Forest University and studied English. And I always loved magazines, but Wake Forest didn't have a journalism program. So I sort of stumbled into it. I actually began being a medical reporter, and I did that for like 10 years. And then worked my way into magazines, which is what I always loved to begin with. So I've done most of that at Atlanta Magazine. I mean, I wrote for others. I freelanced for a while and wrote for some national shelter magazines, but I really loved most writing about where I lived. So I just decided to focus.
Well, that was great. All right, so
So I know what you're going to say
this is a
because
really crazy
I know,
question,
but I
but
want to.
but
I'm looking
you
forward
know
to the
when you look
answer.
at the masthead, there's a lot of jobs there. But what exactly do magazine editors do?
It is actually kind of confusing because
It
you look on there
is.
and you see editor, executive editor, managing editor, and if
Yeah.
if you don't know the industry, you don't really know who's doing what here. Um, the editor is actually the person who runs it. It's either called editor or editor in chief.
Hmm.
Um, and basically, I look for good stories and then try to tell them in interesting ways. And that's true whether it's the home magazine where I am looking for a good visual story or the monthly magazine where I'm maybe looking for a more narrative story. So I try to find something that catches your interest. In the home realm, I'm looking for a house. Um, that has an interesting story that doesn't look just like a collection of the latest trends that could be a showroom or a hotel room. I want it to have personality.
Do
Does that
you
make
think
sense?
that Atlanta? Oh yeah. Do you think that Atlanta Home magazine has a voice or a, I don't want to say theme, but like an attraction that's different from other magazines?
Well, I think what we try to do is reflect Atlanta, the city
Mhm.
of Atlanta, and really, I mean the metro area. I don't mean just the city limits. So really, the metro
Yeah.
area. So we have the personality. I try to think our personality reflects the personality of where we live. I think that's
Hmm.
what city magazines do, and even in the home magazine, I think the homes that we feature reflect the personalities of the homes and the people who live here.
Yeah, I
So,
want to say in national magazines, you don't necessarily hear too much about the families, or they're usually not interviewed. Or and I that's the one thing I do like. I like to hear from the homeowner
Yeah.
and what they, what it
mhm,
did for them and what their experience was. So I kind of like that about a city
yeah.
magazine.
And I think, the fun part of having a shelter book related to home magazine is it does tell those personal stories. It's so many of the shelter books are aimed at designers and they're reading about each other's work, but this is much, I think this is read by both designers and the people who live in the houses. It's
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing
yeah.
I really love about your magazine, and I'm wondering, I'm sure this is very intentional, but just for our listeners, when I pick up this magazine, there's several things that I like. I love the feeling of the paper. There's some
Mhm.
magazines I don't like to touch. I don't know why. It's just that the paper quality is different. I like the size. I don't know if your magazine is more square than others. It kind of feels like it is. But I also like how the features bleed really far to the edges. Like I don't want to squint. I want to
Yeah.
see, you know, I want to
Mhm.
see the whole thing because I want to get like up close and personal to it. So I just love that it's always, you know, such a big
Yeah.
picture. So I'm sure those are all very intentional choices for
Yeah.
you guys.
I think that unfortunately, a lot of magazines, they feel like anybody who knows how to use, InDesign can put together the magazine, which is not true. I mean, there is an art, just like designing a room, there is an art
Yep.
to composing the pages of a magazine so that you can tell a difference between the ads and the editorial content, and so that you sort of know where you are in the book. And one of my complaints with a lot of other magazines these days is, you can't tell whether this is an ad or this is
Oh, so true.
editorial,
A
and
lot.
things
There's
are floating around unanchored, and you can't figure out what
Yeah,
goes with
I
what.
totally I totally agree. I totally agree with that.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So what's one thing about your job people would be surprised to know? Mhm.
Well,
Here it
I think
comes.
about I think about the home magazine, like, people think, "Oh my gosh, you edit a shelter book, like, your home must be fantastic," and I'm like, "Well, no." Like, you know, it's I sort of compare it to a food critic versus a chef. Like, I have tremendous admiration for professional designers. I mean, it's technical, it's complicated, and it's just I can recognize good design when I see it, but I can't do it myself. And I mean, I have little moments, but
Yeah.
Well, you've
I
got some
you
pretty
know,
great art in your space there right now.
oh,
Yeah.
thanks.
Yeah.
I know it's funny because I always think of that as of our photographers as well. Lauren Rubenstein shot this latest
Mhm.
project for us, and she recently she was posting that she just did this a listening room in her home with all her and her husband's LPs. They've got
Mhm.
thousands of them, and it's so cool. And I'm thinking, what she's exposed to,
Yeah.
like you, like wow.
Yeah.
I mean,
She
you're
painted
really
it like a pretty navy blue. I'm sure that might have been a recommendation from maybe us. I don't know.
Someone.
that's funny.
So you've been doing this for so long.
Mm,
I know a lot of people will ask us, what's the most interesting, design
Or
project or
challenge,
whatever. So
yeah,
what's the
mhm,
most interesting article that's
yeah,
come across your desk that you've,
or memorable for you.
yeah.
yeah. I mean, I have been editing for a long time, so I haven't had as many opportunities to write as I used to. And I think always the things that I've written myself are the things that stick with me the most. And my favorite stories have been when my interest in design overlaps with my interest in the city of Atlanta, and I can pull those two things together. Um, one piece I did, it's been like 10 years ago. There's a neighborhood in Atlanta called Collier Heights, and
Mhm.
it was one of the first ranch house neighborhoods to go on the historic
Ah,
register. And so the houses were built in the 50s. And so I originally was just going to write about the architecture and like, oh, this is cool. Ranch houses are historic now. Um, and then when I got into it, I discovered that um, it was a predominantly Black neighborhood, and they had started building this neighborhood basically because they were not welcome in other places. And they created these fantastic entertainment spaces because they were not welcome in other spaces. But the community there was phenomenal, and the architecture was phenomenal, and it was just a fascinating story, and I got to meet a lot of historic Atlantans and look at some cool mid-century modern homes, and it was just sort of the perfect combination for me of everything I'm interested
Yeah.
in.
that is so interesting
Yeah.
because A, you don't think of ranch houses on the historical
Mhm.
register
No,
first and foremost, and then just how that architectural trend for those families
Yeah.
was created because they weren't invited to social gatherings other places. I
yeah,
love that. Do
yeah.
you do you write a good majority of the stories for the
No, I don't get to
no.
write much anymore. I mostly edit, and
Yeah.
that's why that one stuck with me because,
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I got to write it,
Yeah.
but,
Mhm.
yeah, I do these days, I don't do a whole lot of writing, I do more editing, more sort of big
Mhm.
picture, what stories we're gonna
Mhm.
have and who's that type of thing.
We were just talking about what was it on our show house show where we were really encouraging our listeners to read the
Yes.
magazines. Don't just look at the pretty pictures,
Mhm.
read
Mhm.
them because
Yeah.
they're very well written and they're
Yeah.
so interesting.
Yeah. And you find things out like if you're just looking at the picture, okay, but then you read through and say they used this, whatever, and then you notice it because you might not have noticed
Right.
it.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Well, for example, in the Murphy project that we just featured,
mhm.
you know, by Kandrac Kole, if you hadn't read the text, you might not realize the way you guys reconfigured that space, which was so smart, and the way you opened it all up and took an old, more traditional house and
Mhm.
just completely reinvented it. Like, I mean, you can see it in the photos, but if you hadn't read about it, you might not
Yeah.
realize quite how that
Yeah.
worked.
So there's so much that comes across your desk, I'm sure. And so Lisa Mowry, who was the
Mhm.
scout
Mhm.
basically and the writer, she, when she brought this to you, what made you, because you only have so many features,
Mhm.
so we're so, grateful that you thought this project was worthy of it because we, of course, we put our blood, sweat, and tears in it. And it's definitely probably one of my favorite projects we've ever worked on. So
Mhm.
what did you see in it that made you think that this would be good for the
Yeah.
magazine?
Well, Lisa and I have a couple tests. She actually wrote the editor's note in this issue, and she talks about the next day test. Like when we look at photos of a project, does something stick with us? So, like the next day, do you remember some interesting room or detail in a home? And if you can't even remember really what was there, it's probably not going to be that memorable. And in this case, that porch is just
Let's
kind of place I wanted to just go hang out, and that's sort of a
Mhm.
second test is, are these spaces that you would like to be in, and to live in?
Mhm.
So I think
see if we can get
that
that up
project
there.
definitely passed, that test, that
Porch.
you remembered things. Um,
Let's see if we
so
can get
that's
that
just
in
sort of
there.
Oh,
the
here,
first.
Russ is bringing
Yeah,
it up.
Oh, Russ, bring it up. There you go.
great.
And Daisy cooperated to lay on this bench. Lay on the.
Mhm.
I
Oh,
know
we
my
always
husband
love
was
the
great.
dog.
Yeah, she was an angel, and she just, we didn't have to do much with her.
But what was so interesting is when Cindy approached us about the project and we were talking about the different spaces, she just said that her family had gone to an Airbnb, I don't remember where, that had 2 bed swings that were facing each other. And she goes, we were on those things, just having family conversations and whatever, like a good portion of the weekend. So we want to incorporate that. And so lucky enough, we have Atlanta Bed Swings here in Atlanta who does an amazing job. And we created that spot. And
Totally custom designed. I
Yeah.
mean, the colors, the
Yeah.
shape, the fabrics, everything.
and they absolutely love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, even though you completely reinvented it appears that home. I don't know, if any of that.
Oh yeah,
It, yeah,
completely.
it looks
Mhm.
all new. I mean, it has that personality that I was talking about earlier. Like a lot of times, um, you can tell that the designers came in and that homeowners weren't involved, and it doesn't have personality. I mean, it may technically look great, but that place, the art, the fabrics, the Zoom room, it was all
Mhm.
you could tell that the family was invested in it. The family um, used it, lived there, and I don't know, those things, they may seem intangible, but they come across.
I'm so glad you recognize that, because this was a very collaborative effort with our clients. And while Cindy and Tom really kind of shared everything they wanted their house to be, at the same time, they completely let us do our job.
They were very open.
So open to everything.
And then Rothman and Rothman, the architect, did an amazing job and were so wonderful to work with. And that's, like the collaboration.
It was a wonderful partnership.
Yeah, everybody had their input, and it just ended up being an amazing project with all the different ideas and different creativity involved, and just wonderful clients. So
Yeah. But yeah, that really does make a big difference, because, and what you can't really tell in the picture that Russ has showing up right now, the art that we had commissioned by Jay Scott in the family room is an abstract, but there are you can see the features of the mom and dad and their 2 kids and their 2 dogs at the time. They're
3
painted.
kids.
It's pretty.
3 kids.
Sorry, 3 kids. Really clearly in that painting. So there's little touches everywhere that reflect their family.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing about it that was very different is it's a very traditional home on the outside. And they were a little bit nervous, thinking that should the inside match the outside? And that was where they were trying to decide whether they should just move. And we were able to make it pretty modern on the inside
Yeah,
or
it
whatever,
is.
but it doesn't really matter. It wasn't
Yeah.
this. Yeah. So
Yeah.
if
I'm
anything, I
curious.
hope.
I'm curious what y'all think. So you think, I mean, I kind of think it doesn't matter. I think it's kind of fun when you walk in the door and it's
Yeah.
a surprise, but I'm curious what you guys think as professionals. Do you think the inside can be what you want it to be?
The only time I think where it would feel weird is if you walk through the front door and let's just say they did all glass and they had, chrome,
Like uber modern.
uber modern,
Mhm.
This
where
wasn't
the
that.
outside has some stone and some
Yeah.
siding, you wouldn't expect that. But other than that, I think you can get away with it.
I totally do. And this is they had decided that this was going to be their forever home until they, really super duper downsized. So they were
Yeah.
totally willing to make that investment. And I think a lot of folks have decided that to stay in the house that they're in just for one reason or another. Interest rates are going up, or they try to move and they find that the homes are so much more expensive than they thought. And that's why we do so many renovations. This was a real true blue, like rethink the whole entire house, and
Mhm.
Yeah.
why we advocate for architects so much. But there's so much texture in the house with bringing the outdoors in and tile, and that it still feels really cozy.
Yeah.
I think
And
because
and the
of all
other
that.
thing that we did in this house, which we don't normally do, is the kitchen is laminate. So it
Mm.
has definitely more of a modern feel. And
Mhm.
I think it's good for people to see that just because you live in a typical, I don't know, up north we call them colonial type homes, but if you just live in your traditional home,
Suburban.
you can still do things that are a little out of the box for a
Mhm.
traditional home.
Mhm.
Absolutely, because I don't think
Yeah.
that steps out as like anything, really crazy.
Mm.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah, it's nice because people love where they live. They have their neighbors and they've got the place where they walk their dogs, and they don't really wanna leave all that.
and that was their feeling as well. It's
Yeah.
super private, and
Yeah.
they have 3 kids that come home all the time, and they wanted space for them. And
Yeah, and they struggled with the decision for about a year.
Mhm.
And then when they finally decided they were going to do it, it was like, go, go for it. It all went very fast after that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So thankfully here in Atlanta, we have we have such close relationships with our photographers and with our scouts like Lisa Mallory and with our editors. But what advice would you give? We have a lot of designers who listen, who are really would love their work to be recognized. Do you have any advice for them of how to approach you as the
Yeah,
editor in chief?
I think, it's I don't think it's necessary to hire, say, a PR professional. I think some people feel like
Mhm.
they have to hire, a PR person. I don't think that's necessary. Um, I do think it's good to hire, if you can, to hire a professional photographer and shoot your projects. Um, that makes it easier for magazines. As you well know, a professional photographer is going to make your project just look all that much better. Um, and a professional photographer, they know things like if there's a big difference between somebody like Lauren and say a real estate photographer who's going to leave on all the
Absolutely.
lamps, and there's just it just drives us crazy when somebody's
Oh, those
hired.
wide shots where everything,
Yes,
Yeah.
everything's expanded makes me
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
yeah, and they leave on all the lamps, and like we'll never
Mhm.
use any of that. We just have to go in and reshoot. Um,
Yep.
I think while you're shooting, it's good to get some details and get an exterior, even if you didn't have anything to do with the exterior, just because um, in a magazine story, the editors often want those things to make the layouts, they we use detail shots and layouts just to make the layouts flow better. And then the
Yep.
outdoor, even if the outdoor image runs small, it sometimes is good context. Um, but when you send images to editors for them to consider, don't send smaller images. It drives us crazy if somebody sends the giant files. First of all, our
Yep.
spam filter is probably not gonna let them through, and then it just
Yeah.
drives us crazy. It takes 5 minutes for one to load, and we don't have
Yeah.
that kind of time. So, a quick PDF that we can just look really quickly. We don't even need those detail shots on the PDF. Like, sometimes
Yep.
somebody will you know, they'll send us 75 shots, and 25 of them are a picture of a vase of flowers, like, which
Yep.
I don't need that when I'm just deciding, are we gonna
Right.
run this or not,
Exactly.
you
Yep.
know? And, don't post the pictures on your website first, because a lot of
Mhm.
publications that they will actually won't accept it if you've published it yourself on social media or on your website.
Yeah, this just hit our website 2 days ago. We've been
Yeah.
holding on to it for a long time.
Yeah, you got
And
to
I
be
know
patient.
that's hard because, we're slow and it takes forever for these things to come out. And
It's
that's the
worth
other
it,
thing.
though.
Be patient because
Yep.
Yeah.
it just takes a long time. The magazine publishing does not move quickly. Um, so it could be months and you just have to be prepared to wait.
Yeah.
The other thing that I would add, because we have been lucky to be published many times, is when the writer or the editor or the scout emails you with questions, answer quickly and
Mhm.
thoroughly. They
Mhm.
very much appreciate it. They're always on a
Mhm.
deadline. A lot of times those are rushed, it's a hurry up and wait situation. And
Yeah.
it really makes their job easier. And then when they like you and they consider you a great resource, they will
They'll
come
call you
back
back.
to you.
And have your
Yeah.
sources ready too. A lot of times they'll want to know where
Yes.
those things came from. So when you're talking about maybe a custom something, it's great to be able to share who did the work. So if you
Right.
have all those things, keep it all ready so that
Yeah.
if you do get called and they ask for it, you can respond quickly.
Mhm. And if you have a proprietary source, it's okay to put, custom through Kandrac and Kole. That's fine.
Mhm.
If you've got some sources that you want to sort of keep to yourself, which is understandable. So, um, that's fine. But yes, the list of sources is very helpful, and we do, as you know, sort of a relentless fact checking process, which can
Yes.
seem tedious, but
I
Oh,
appreciated
I do
I
too.
I appreciated that.
How do
Yeah.
you feel about styling, Betsy? Because I feel like Joanne and I always do our own. We've never hired somebody, although we've thought about it many times and we might still do it. But some magazines I look in, I probably it's just the designer, I and me. But like
Mhm.
you said, designers, we all watch the designer magazines. Sometimes I can't get past how bad the styling is, or if it's overdone. I
Yeah.
can't I can't concentrate on the
Yeah.
work itself. How do you
Mhm.
feel about styling overall?
Um, this is I've sort of changed my attitude about styling over the years. 7, 8 years ago, I'll be like, "You need a stylist," but I think in this social media world, everybody's gotten a little better at it.
Mhm.
So I think it's fine to do your own styling, but keep in mind things like don't take the same vase of flowers and put it in 3 different rooms, you know,
We
and
learned that a long
Absolutely.
time ago. Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah.
our
You don't think
photographers
about
have
it. You
taught
don't
us a
you don't
lot.
think
Yeah.
about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and don't, and I really hate the styling cliches. I mean, there's certain things
The
that
bowl of green apples, you mean?
yeah.
Lemon.
The things that get used over and over and over again just don't enhance your project.
If I see
So,
another Hermes blanket, I'm gonna lose it.
Yeah, I know it.
Um,
S So what are some of your favorite magazines to read, Betsy? I'm curious. Like, what do you
um,
like?
I mean, I like magazines that are sort of an escapism for me. Like, I think,
mhm.
the kind of magazine that you wanna sit down with a cup of coffee or a glass of wine and just kinda let your brain go, and I
Mhm.
enjoy the long, heavy duty stories from something like The Atlantic, but honestly, I'm gonna read those online. Um,
Yeah.
so I like when I'm gonna sit down with a print magazine, I want it to be just sort of a little, I don't know, a little vacation kinda thing. I like
Yep.
shelter magazines, um, and they go through eras, like,
Mhm.
I've
Yeah.
loved House Beautiful since I was a teenager, but different
Mhm.
eras I like better than others.
Yeah.
I
Um,
completely
Yeah.
agree.
and again, one of my issues with current magazines is what I was talking about before of them sort of feeling especially the front of the book. You can almost tell more about a magazine by the front of the book than you can by the feature well, because the feature well, they
Well, wait
don't
a minute.
differ.
What's that? What's a
Oh,
feature
sorry.
well? We don't know this. We don't know the lingo.
So the feature well, those are the long pieces, like, like your piece, and those have no advertising, and they have big images.
Mhm.
Um, and so they'll be the longer stories are all together, and we call that the feature well. Then the
Okay.
front of the book is all the short pieces before that.
Got
And
it.
that is really where magazine design is quite critical, because if you don't know magazine design, those are the pieces that seem to float around, and one minute you're in an ad, and one minute you're in a story, and you can't tell which is which. Um, so I like that front part of the book to be well constructed and clear. But the other thing is, maybe it's because I'm old, but I don't like, I gravitate towards the things that are more of a story than the things that are super servicey, like here,
Yeah.
5 ways to do this and 6 ways to do that. I
I
like
totally
new
agree.
Yeah.
products, because I might not run into those, especially as a consumer, and I'm not going to High Point, so I like, seeing the new products and stuff like that. But, here are 5 tips on choosing your contractor. I'm like, I can Google that up in a heartbeat. I don't really
Yeah.
want to sit down and read that. I wanna read,
Yeah.
the story of a house, and I like quirky things like Cabana that has all these crazy places in it.
Like my husband
Yeah.
said, the Murphys had a USB outlet in their sofa. I was like, thank you for reading the article, honey. Yes, they did have
Yes.
a USB outlet in their sofa.
Yeah, or
Yes.
all the chairs are on, casters, duh.
Yeah.
I was
Yes,
like
exactly. That's
Yeah.
funny.
Mhm.
Well, I know that we have so many listeners who are just gobbling up all this information. It's so
It's
helpful.
intimidating. It's
It is. And
intimidating
it's
if you don't know it. But after going to many conferences and, where there were editors or magazine people, and they just, yeah, they said a lot of the same things that you did, and they're looking for information. So don't be afraid to
oh,
send
yeah.
it.
and I
I
think
mean, it's
the other thing is a lot of times when you're turned down by a magazine, you don't always get the feedback of why. And so it's hard
Mhm.
to improve. And so knowing this information up front hopefully can save some people. And another thing that we've talked about before, and then we got to wrap it up, is if you approach a magazine and you get turned down, don't let that be the end all to that. Look to your very, very local, smaller magazines, newspapers. Look to blogs. Look to other
Yeah.
sources,
Mhm.
because I mean, I'm telling you, we've gotten more calls
Mhm.
from one article that hit Cobb Life magazine 10 years ago than we
Yeah.
did if we were in House Beautiful.
Well,
So,
I
you
do
know,
tell people, like, don't overlook the local media, because that's really where you get your clients,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
Yeah.
I think
absolutely.
designers love to be in national magazines, and it, increases your credibility. But the local magazines,
Yeah.
that's where your clients live, and where potential clients live. So
Yeah.
local
Mhm.
media is important. And
Yeah.
often, we might turn something down because we had something similar either planned or
Right.
just published. It's not that we don't like that particular project. It's
Yeah.
just we know we couldn't run it for 2 years because we just ran something, and
Yep.
we know the person, so.
Absolutely. Well, hold on for a second before we say goodbye. We're going to close with our quotes that everybody loves.
Yep. Okay, I'll do the funny one because
Okay.
this is me. Although this wasn't me
This is
this wasn't even me at 18, but we'll just pretend me at 18. As long as I get home at 4 a.m., I can get up for work at 6. Me now, how dare you even suggest we start a movie at 8 p.m.? That's from my therapist says. Their stuff is so funny.
Yeah, on Instagram. That's so funny. Okay, here is our serious quote. Ready? The truth is that style and taste are all relative. It's not a question whether someone has good taste. It's how something feels to the individual. And that's from Kelly Hoppen, the interior designer. And that
Yep.
is so true. And
Mhm.
I think that speaks a lot to our this project that
Yeah.
Mhm.
that Betsy was
Yeah.
kind enough to feature.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Well, thank you, Betsy, for joining us. I mean, you're just always awesome, and we're just huge fans of your
Yes.
magazine, and it's just consistently amazing.
Like Kelly said, the pages,
It's
the way
national
it's laid
magazine
out,
quality,
yeah, it definitely is.
1000%.
Definitely is.
Thank you. Well, mutual
Yeah.
admiration. So
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us, Betsy. And thank you to ProSource for sponsoring this podcast, our good buddies.
We are.
And then
We're
announcement
peacing out,
time.
kids. Yep.
Announcement time.
Okay, real quick.
We still
Russ,
have
we need the ding,
Yeah.
ding,
Ding.
ding.
we still have a few spots left for the Insiders Tour for High
Yes.
Point. If you've never been to High Point,
Yep.
or if you haven't been, I think in 2 markets, you're eligible to come. It's free. Just go on to the highpointmarket.org and you'll see Insiders Tour. And so
Just a handful of spots left.
Yeah, we bring a group of 15 designers or people who've never been to our curated showrooms and
Yes.
all that good
Show
stuff.
you the lay of the land for High Point so you don't have to freak out. Don't go
Mhm.
by yourself because you will freak out.
Yeah.
We
And-
are getting on a plane in less than 24 hours, and we will see you all in Marrakesh and Lisbon. We are going for 10 days, but by the time this airs, I think
We'll be back. We'll
We'll
be back.
So our next show, hopefully, will be we'll have some really cool tops on or earrings, or I don't know. We'll have all kinds of stories to tell.
Yeah.
So, but we've just decided that we are getting close to being burnt out, and that's never a good thing. So we're jumping on a plane because we deserve it.
Yep.
Yeah. So we appreciate you all listening, and thanks again to Betsy Riley.
thanks,
Check out
Betsy.
Atlanta Home Magazine. Their latest issue is on newsstands now.
Yep.
Okay.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
Bye.
thanks, guys.
Join Joanne and Kelly for a new episode every other Friday as they continue to explore the nuances of the interior design business with the goal of informing, inspiring, and entertaining their listeners. See their work at kandrac-kole.com and engage with them on Facebook and Instagram at Kandrac Kole.